you guys have enjoyed Labor Day. I've only been down here for 2 years now, so third Labor Day now? Yeah, third Labor Day. It's weird because coming from Seattle, Labor Day is like the end of summer and everyone's in mourning. And here everyone's like, hey, good money's going to come soon. And so I hope you have an enjoyable weekend, do something fun on Monday. And college football's back, even though my team was terrible. So, yeah, it was bad. So if I need a little hellfire brimstone today, I apologize. It's not the best state of mind this morning, but I'm used to it. So one of the things that always fascinates me is Netflix. We don't really do the cable thing. We didn't cut the cord because when we bought the house, we didn't put the cord in. And so we use Netflix and other accounts and stuff like that. And they have a lot of these like crime documentary drama series. Have you guys seen these things? Yeah, a bunch of you guys are nodding. And so I got into them about like a year and a half ago. And then I got too stressed and I stopped watching them. But it's fascinating because it's like this weird thing where this case is already done and settled, but you're watching it as if it's happening. And in there's always sort of this feeling of justice versus injustice. What's actually happening here is justice happening. You also have a filmmaker who is trying to get you to see a certain point of view. And so there's all these competing feelings. And usually somewhere towards the end, there's this one witness that clearly wants to be very, very important in the trial. And he or she, whether they are a scientific expert or a character witness or something like that, like the way the documentary frames it, you become really angry at them because they paint them in such a picture where they are trying to have influence and power over this trial that's happening. And I remember I watched How to Make a Murder. That's very different shows. They start with the same sounding words. Sorry, wow, that was a slip. Yeah, so Making a Murder, right? And I remember like towards the end, I was like, how can they let this happen? And I'm like, wait a second, like I need to call, like I'm getting really angry about this person who I think is trying to have so much influence. They're trying to use this to influence something that I would say is unjust. And what I think that reveals in us is that we have a great desire for justice and truth. However, in that desire for justice and truth, because we are broken and sinful people and we live in a broken and sinful world, we try to either cheat the system or game the system or be an influential person in the system so that we can feel like we're in control, like we're in power. And the reason I bring that up is because this morning, as we continue through John 18, we're going to find this feeling of testimony and trial. There's going to be a feeling of injustice, and there's going to be really two bad examples of testimony and of justice, and one shining example that influence and justice are only for Christ. In a situation where Christ is not supposed to have any influence, he is the one who we see as the true testimony. He doesn't need expert witnesses. He doesn't need exonerating evidence. He doesn't even need an ethical, just judge. All Jesus needs is what he has already done to this point. So if you have your scriptures, your Bibles, we're going to be in John chapter 18. If you've been with us through January, we are walking verse by verse through the Gospel of John. We'll finish towards the end of October, might stretch to November. And so if you've been with us for a long time, some of you wish that I would take longer in John. And Lord bless you, we can hang out and keep going deep and deep. And I'm fine with that. And some of you are like, all right, let's get on to this Christmas series, right? Like, it's almost Christmas. Doesn't feel like it, but by the time this is done, I'm thinking about Christmas. So John chapter 18, we're in verses 12 through 27 today. We're going to go really section through section here. It's kind of choppy, which I'm going to explain to you why it's choppy as we go. So John 18, verses 12 through 14 to begin with here. So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested him and bound him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. All right, so stop there. Now, remember contextually, Jesus was just arrested last week. He was in the Garden of Gethsemane. 600 to 1,000 Roman soldiers, plus Jewish guards, Jewish leaders, all show up with Jesus and his 11 disciples, because Judas is helping the other guy at this point. And they show up, and Jesus says, I am Jesus of Nazareth. That's who you're looking for. Take me. Don't take my disciples. I will come with you. Now here it says they backed him, which seems unnecessary, right? When all these people showed up, Jesus initiated last week. Jesus started. They didn't have to bind him. But they want everyone in Jerusalem who was there for the Passover to see Jesus as a criminal. So that it's very important that he is in chains, that he is bound, and he's led away. Now the Jewish leaders for a long time have been planning this. They have been working towards getting Jesus killed. Right? We talked about this briefly last week, but in John chapter 5, Jesus heals a lame man on the Sabbath, and they want to arrest him, but they couldn't because the Sabbath law meant they could not arrest him, which the Sabbath law is actually going to play into the timeline of we're on Good Friday here, sometime early Good Friday here, and Jesus will die before sundown, because sundown on Friday is the beginning of the Jewish Sabbath, right? So we're in likely the final 12, 16 hours of Jesus' life. Now, spoiler alert, he's going to raise from the dead, so it's not the end of his life. But for all intents and purposes, the Jews think that they are within 12, 16, 24 hours of getting rid of this man, Jesus. In John chapter 7, they actually sent guards to arrest him, but instead the guards listened to what he had to say. In John chapter 10, they try to stone him. In John chapter 12, the leaders come together to plot to kill him. In John 18, they finally arrest him. And Caiaphas, who is not the main inquisitor, he's not the main judge in our passage today, he is technically in charge. He is the high priest. And in John 11, after Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, if you want to flip over to a few pages in your scripture, Caiaphas, which they quote this prophecy here, he prophesies that in John 11, verses 46, no, that's not 46. 49. In John 12, verse 49, it says, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for one man should die for his people than the whole nation should perish. So Caiaphas, high priest, prophesies, we need to kill him to save the nation. He doesn't realize what he's prophesying. He thinks he's prophesying, if we don't kill Jesus, he's going to raise up people that Rome will see as a threat, and they will take out all of us. What he's actually doing, unknowingly, unwillingly, but by the power of God, he's prophesying the truth, that Jesus must die to save all people. To save the nation of Israel, the Messiah, Jesus Christ must die. He's unaware of it. And even here, at the start of his trials, he goes through many trials with many different inquisitors, Caiaphas' prophecy is quoted in verse 14. He advised the Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. But he's not the main person who we're going to deal with this morning. The main person we're going to deal with is a man named Annas. And I'm going to say his name a lot today, so I've been practicing it, because a slip of the tongue would make it sound very bad, right? So, Annas is Caiaphas' father-in-law. Annas was high priest from around AD 5 to AD 16. Okay, so 6 to 15. But what happened was the Roman leader at the time, the man before Pilate, was a man named Valerius Gratus. And he did not like Annas. And so Annas was removed from the post of high priest, which Rome can do because they are in charge. But according to the Mosaic law, you are a high priest for life, right? Just like here in the U.S., if you appoint a Supreme Court judge, unless they decide to resign, they are there until they die. And some of them do that. Some of them get bored, like, I want to retire. But according to the Mosaic law, Annas should still be high priest. Now, even though he is not officially high priest in the eyes of Rome, he is sort of the patriarch of the high priestly family. He is the one in charge. In fact, not only is Caiaphas his son-in-law, the current high priest, but we know from a man named Josephus. Josephus was a Jewish historian around the time of Jesus, a little bit after Jesus. He tells us that 5 of Caiaphas' sons end up being high priests. All right? So you get a sense of the power that resides in this family. And specifically the power that resides in Annas. If he, though he is not officially high priest, has all of his sons and his son-in-law getting them the highest position in Jewish religion, then certainly he still has authority. And so in this first trial, if we can even call it that, Annas is the one who is putting Jesus to the test. Annas is the one who is asking questions. He's a powerful man, and he likes his influence. He likes that when Jesus gets arrested, they show up at his house. And even though his son-in-law is high priest, he's the one in charge. He's the one who is working. And then we start to go into this thing. We seem to have two scenes on the same night that we bounce back and forth from. Keep reading here. You'll notice that we go from Jesus arrested, he's in front of Annas, and then suddenly, in verse 15 through 18, look at this. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood outside the door. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You also are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing warming themselves. And Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. So on one hand, you almost wonder what John is doing as an author, right? Because we go from Jesus is arrested to Peter at the fire, and then if you notice, if you glance ahead, we go back to Annas and Jesus, and then eventually we'll end up back with Peter. And we are bouncing forth between these two scenes. But it strikes me that if something is this strange, it means that John is trying to show us something. Right? John would not employ such odd narrative sequence unless he wanted us to see something. And so what he wants us to see is the different types of testimony. Peter would be an expert witness about Jesus. Right? Peter has been there for years. He's been following with Jesus. He has seen all of his signs. He's heard all of his teachings. He's one of the three closest disciples. He was at the Transfiguration. If anyone knows about Jesus, Peter does. So what John is trying to show us here is that between Annas and this improper judge figure, we also have Peter, who is an incorrect witness. And both of them should be doing what is right. They're both doing what is wrong. Now, there's this weird thing where we find out that Peter isn't allowed in at the start. Some other disciple is. More than likely, that is the Apostle John, the man who wrote the book that we've been reading for 10 months now. John came from a wealthier family who was a fishing, a good fishing business in Galilee. It's likely that John's father knew some of the people in the high priestly family. And so John, who never refers to himself in the Gospel of John by his first name, he always calls himself the disciple whom Jesus loved, is probably the unnamed disciple here. He gets into the high priest's house, into the courtyard, and then gets Peter in. And so we have this interesting situation where we have Peter and John who follow Jesus. They go with him. They go to the high priest's house. And we know from Matthew that all the other disciples go in. They go into hiding. And so Peter, though he's not alone, he's not in a normal situation for him. He's in an exclusive house, in an exclusive place, with lots of important people. And then suddenly, a servant girl approaches him. Now here's why that's important. It's really easy to skip over the fact that it's just a servant girl who's asking the question. The two lowest class of people in Roman society and in Jewish society at this time are slaves and women. Now, some of you women in this room don't like that. That's fine. You can say that that is not good. You can say that Genesis, God says that He made man and woman in His image, and so both are created in His image, and that is wrong. And that is true. But in this situation, the fact that it is a young servant girl is pointing out how little power she has. She has no influence. She has no power. She cannot go to the parts of the temple where Peter can go. She certainly can't go where Annas and Caiaphas can go. Yet she is the first one to ask a question. She is the first one to make an accusation. Now, on a side note, for you women who are upset with the fact that this is a lowly position in this society, what you will notice is that throughout the course of history, from Jesus on, the societies that have been most progressive in seeing the rights of human beings, especially women, and then allowing those to grow and be encouraged, are societies that were built by Christian values. And so Christianity is countercultural in how it saw women. We'll notice that when we get to the resurrection. The women are the first ones to find Jesus. They're the first ones to testify that Jesus is raised. So Christianity is a religion that is for all people, men and women. But in this situation, a young servant girl has no power. She has no authority. She has no influence. And yet she goes to the man who should be the expert witness and says, aren't you one of the disciples? But that's not actually how she says it. But notice how she says it. You also are not one of this man's disciples, are you? And that type of question expects the answer, no. I like to watch European soccer because it's fascinating. They're actually good. But all the British announcers will say a statement, and then they'll say, isn't he or isn't it? And so they'll say what they want you to think, and then they'll ask you the question, is this not true? Same thing is happening here. So they're watching the goalie made a really stupid mistake, and he said something like, that goal is rubbish, isn't he? And I'm like, is rubbish a bad word in Great Britain? I'm not sure. But anyways, right, like, he's saying this is what he is, isn't he? Same type of question here. Peter, you aren't one of his disciples, are you? The expectation, the setup of the question is no. That's the easy answer, and Peter goes for the easy answer. Peter denies Jesus for the first time. Now, way back a few chapters ago, Jesus says, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. In the Gospel of John, the denial of Jesus, the denial by Peter of Jesus is not as prominent as in the other Gospels. But Jesus said this was going to happen. And it's really easy to get lost in all these different denials and trying to find the symbolism, and we lose the point specifically of what John is trying to do here. And that is that John is not really focused on what the denial is. He's focused on who Jesus is. And so, watch what keeps happening, right? So we go from Peter's first denial back to Jesus, verses 19 through 24. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered him, I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temples, where also the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. They know what I said. When he said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, Is that how you answer the high priest? Even though it's not actually the high priest. Jesus answered him, If what I said is wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I said is right, why do you strike me? Annas then sent him back to Caiaphas, the high priest. So now we're back to Annas and Jesus. And Jesus is talking to the high priest. He's eventually sent to Caiaphas, the high priest. And so we know that Annas is the one doing this first interrogation. So we go from the lowest person in the house, the servant girl, to the most powerful man in the house, the patriarch of the family, the patriarch of the high priestly family. And Annas wants Jesus to tell him about 2 things. Do you see what those 2 things are? His disciples and his teaching. He wants to know about his followers and what he is teaching. He starts with the followers. But the funny thing is, they should know all this already. They literally just arrested Jesus with his 11 really close followers. On Sunday, this is Friday, on Sunday they saw the crowds that praised him, and they're not with him before he's arrested. Jesus has 11 men, one of which was denying him, 10 of which have scattered, and one of which has already betrayed him. And Annas is asking about his followers. So why would you do such a thing? Why would you ask that type of question if you know Jesus doesn't have that many followers at this point? If you know that now that Jesus is arrested, that his followers are not quite as on board with Jesus' train as they were a few minutes ago, a few days ago, a few weeks ago. The reason he asks the question is because he wants to be seen as the one who is influential and powerful. He's asking a rhetorical question of Jesus here. Where are your followers in a room full of his followers? Probably in a beautiful house that had a view of the temple where you can say, look at all of my followers. He's saying, I'm the one who has power. I'm the one who has influence. You are back in front of me. You need to tell me about your followers because my followers are in greater number. I have greater power than you. Annas, who is supposed to be a high priest, who understands the role of a high priest, doesn't. The high priest is supposed to go before God on behalf of the people. The high priest knows that they are weak, that they, when they enter the Holy of Holies, can be struck down. That one day a year, the Day of Atonement, when they get to enter into the holiest of holy places with the Ark of the Covenant, which is the footstool of God, where the presence of Yahweh dwelt, they tied a rope around him because sometimes throughout history the high priest was a little bit too much of a sinner or did something wrong and was struck dead, pulled out by the rope. You would think that Caiaphas would understand that even though he has an honorable position, is in an honorable family, he should know that in the end he is weak. But because he has let the power and the influence that is available to him and his family corrupt him, he's lost it. He wants to compare the number of followers. If he was around today, he would want to know if he has more followers on Instagram and Twitter than the other priests and rabbis and pastors out there. It's a competition for him for who has the most influence. I always find it funny when there's people who have jobs now, they're called social media influencers. That's not a thing. Like, how's that a thing? What is it if you're an influencer? I mean, I guess I'm still an influencer, but like this, it's very different. No one really wants to see pictures of me doing skincare routines, trying to sell it on Instagram. It's a totally strange thing, right? It's influencers. But this is the same exact thing, right? 2,000 years, our concept of influence has changed. It's either gotten more sophisticated or less sophisticated, depending on how you want to see it. But the same desire that is in people today on social media to have influence and followers is the same thing the high priest of the nation of Israel, who should know that before Yahweh he is nothing, cares more about. The God of the universe stands in front of him and he wants to know who has more followers. Right? Could you imagine Jesus standing before you and you'd be like, hey Jesus, let's pull up Instagram. I just want to see how close I am to you in the number of followers. Because I think, especially on Snapchat, I guess Jesus beat, right? Jesus is not on Snapchat. It's just the way it is. He's also breaking the rules. He is the leader of Judaism, for the most part. His son-in-law is by title, but he goes to Annas first. And he's not following the proper rules. We know from the Mishnah, which tells the Jewish leadership, the Sanhedrin, how to do a trial if he's doing it incorrectly. This is an unfair trial because the Jewish law taught that the trial, similar to our trials, is about witnesses. It's not about interrogations. In fact, under Jewish law, just like under our law, you have a right not to testify. You have a right not to incriminate yourself. Our Fifth Amendment is somewhat based on Jewish rabbinical law. That you do not have to incriminate yourself. You do not have to talk. And the fact that Annas, who should know this, he should know that Jesus does not have to answer his questions. That in a proper trial, all that matters is witnesses. And not only that, in Jewish law, the defendant's witnesses get to speak first, not the prosecution. Annas is not just a high priest, he is an unrighteous judge. He is breaking the law, he's breaking the Mishnah, and yet Jesus doesn't seem really all that worried. Do you see how Jesus responds? Jesus responds saying, if you did what your trial is supposed to do, you would have all your answers. Look at what Jesus says to him. I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple where the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. It's all there. He's saying to Annas, you know everything that I've done. You guys have been playing these for a while. You know what I've said. You know what I've said that you don't like. You know what I've done that you don't like. And there are plenty of witnesses in this room who can testify to me. Peter's one of them. Peter's not a very good witness. Jesus is saying, I don't need a sham trial. I don't need a good witness or a bad witness. What I've already done and said is my own witness. Which fits with the entire message of the Gospel of John. I've said this to you many times. The purpose of the book of John. This is why I love John as an apostle. He writes in John 20, verses 30 through 31. He says, Jesus has done far more signs and said far more things than I recorded in this book. But these things I write so that you might know that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him you might have life in his name. Jesus is doing that same thing here. He's saying, you've seen my signs. You've heard me say that I am the light of the world, that I before Abraham, that I am the bread of life, that I am the man that came down from heaven, that I am the true shepherd, that I am the resurrection and the life, that I am the way, the truth, and the life, that no one comes to the Father but through me. Why do you need to ask me what I teach? You already know. My testimony stands by itself. Jesus' response is saying, I'm the one with all the power here. Because my testimony will show that I am righteous, and my testimony will show that I must die. Because Jesus said that. In a moment where Annas thinks that he is in control, that he is in power, that he gets to say what is right and what is wrong, that he gets to put the Messiah on trial and show that he's more popular than this fake Messiah that's actually the true Messiah. Only Jesus has the power. Peter could stand up and give an expert witness testimony on behalf of the defendant Jesus, is off by a fire denying him. John, who could give an expert witness account about Jesus, he does later, that's what we've been reading, doesn't. Instead, he stays silently observing. And both of those are true because in the sovereignty of God, he knows that their witness is not necessary yet. It will be. It will be. Their witness will change the course of history because they will tell about what happened on this day, on this morning that leads to a day of suffering and trial that will eventually lead to an evening of death and burial before sundown. They will be expert witnesses, but not yet, because Jesus stands by himself on his own, and it's more than enough. The same way that what John says that the signs and wonders are more than enough for you to believe that he's the Messiah, the Son of God, and by believing you may have life in his name, it is enough to tell Annas exactly what he needs to know, that Jesus does believe that he is the Son of God. Jesus does claim that he is God. Under Jewish law, that does mean he needs to be killed. Time and again, Jesus spoke of who he is. In John chapter 3, he says, I tell you the solemn truth, we speak about what we know and testify about what we have seen, but you do not accept our testimony. For the one whom God sent, talking to himself as sent, speaks the word of God, and he does not give the Spirit sparingly. Jesus is speaking on behalf of God, but Annas can't see it. Even just one chapter earlier, when Jesus was praying to the Father, he says in chapter verses 8 and then verse 14, check this out. Because I have given them the words you have given me, talking about the disciples, they accepted me and really understood that I came from you, and they believed that you sent me. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. He's already said who he is and where he came from. He told his disciples what's going to happen, but they aren't paying attention. The Jewish leaders don't get it. They want to kill him to save the nation. There's this feeling in this trial that you can tell that the influence and power is not actually Annas's. And like the most famous trial movie ever, you can debate it, but there's this scene in A Few Good Men, right? Where Jack Nicklaus is on trial and Tom Cruise, and you're like, kind of pretty to be an army lawyer. Expect him to be a lot more awkward looking. Anyways, he's up there and I'm telling the truth. You can't handle the truth. And in that moment, he's trying to say, I have influence and the power to determine who knows and who doesn't know the truth. That's the same thing Annas is trying to do. He's trying to say, I have the power, and so I get to hear the truth and make condemnation based on it. And Jesus is saying, no, I'm the one who knows the truth. Right? Jesus in this moment could actually turn to Annas and say, you can't handle the truth. Because Jesus has already spoken it. It's already there. It's there for him to know. They've been planning this for long enough. He should know the truth that is out there. And so now, Peter has the same opportunity to speak the truth about Jesus. Jesus speaks the truth about himself. You already know everything you need to know. You've already heard everything you need to hear. You're ready to condemn it. Peter has the same opportunity. Look at verses 25 through 27. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to him, you also are not one of his disciples, are you? He denied it and said, I am not. Notice, second type of question, expects the negative response. But watch this last one. Verse 26. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, did I not see you in the garden with him. Peter again denied it, and at once a rooster crowed. Jesus stood before his accusers, and he denies nothing. Peter hides from them, he cowers, and he denies everything. The first question, same type of question. You're not one of his disciples, are you? No, I'm not. And then he runs into this situation where it's really hard to get away from this. In this moment, Peter is probably realizing it's a life or death question. Because this man is a relative of a guy whose ear he just cut off. Thankfully, Jesus put it back on. He missed last week. He put it back on and healed it. I saw you at the Garden of Gethsemane. You were the one with the sword who cut off my cousin's ear. Like, you would think that that's enough, that they would be like, it doesn't matter if he lied, he's the guy who cut off the dude's ear. It's only the providence and the sovereignty of God that Peter seems to avoid being caught here. You can say what you will about this denial and the message for us and what it means to deny Christ and to follow him. But in this moment, the sovereignty of God protects Peter from what should be death. Right? He should be right next to Jesus. If the cousin or relative or whoever this is of Malchus, whose ear got cut off, says, I saw you there. You were the one with the sword. Peter denies him. You'll notice John is actually kind of gracious in this account. We know from Matthew two things that John does not include. First is that Matthew tells us that Peter curses those who are questioning him. We also know from Matthew that after this happened, when the rooster crowed, that Peter wept bitterly. John doesn't include either of those. Luke mentions that Jesus looks and makes eye contact with Peter after the third denial. John doesn't include that either. John is being rather gracious towards Peter. He's setting up what the last scene of John with Peter and Jesus will be. We'll see that in a month or so. But the point of this, then, is not how bad a disciple Peter is. Right? If that was John's point, if John's point in this text was Peter is a really bad disciple, he could have done it. In fact, just the facts of what happened set up Peter for being a very bad disciple. The man who confessed that Jesus Christ is Lord, that you are God. The man who, at the Last Supper, when Jesus tried to wash his feet, said, I am not worthy. The one who seems to get it more than others, but is also a little more rash and quick to speak than others, here denies Jesus. And the weaving story from false trial to false testimony to false trial to false testimony is supposed to point us to one thing, and that is that Jesus is the truth. Not only is Jesus the truth, he is the true high priest. He's the true high priest who does not let his people down. Annas is letting his people down. Instead of drawing his people to Yahweh, he cares about the power of his position. Jesus doesn't. He's the Son of God. Hebrews 4 tells us that high priests are supposed to be weak because they're humans, but Jesus is the true and better high priest because he is strong. And Hebrews 4 tells us that the high priest did one sacrifice once a year, and that Jesus made one sacrifice for all time. But Jesus is the true and better high priest. He's perfect. He offers the perfect sacrifice. He stands before God on our behalf instead of standing in front of God on his own behalf. Jesus is the true and better high priest who doesn't care about personal importance. He cares about personal sacrifice. He cares about eternal importance. He doesn't need the most followers or the most influence. Jesus doesn't all of his followers abandon him to save people who sin against him. And the world tells us, be like ants. Don't be like Jesus. The world says the most important people are the ones with the most influence. The best people are the ones who have the most followers. That you can tell who's better than others on Twitter by who has the bigger follower number. The world tells us to go after this. And religion does too. Empty religion, without Jesus Christ, says that you need to get influence and power by following all the rules. Right? If you asked Annas and you said, hey, how is your sin life going? You would say, what sin life? I do all the right things. I'm a Pharisee. Just like Paul would say later, I'm a Pharisee. I kept all the rules. I kept all the laws. It's an example of how religion can lose the truth. Because in it, you think that if you do all the good things and none of the bad things, and you put on trial the bad people instead of the good people, that God will look down on you and be pleased. That when you exert your influence and your power for the good of God, then God will look at you and be pleased and say, you are right with me because you have the right powers. You keep my rules. Religion at the end of the day says, do these things and God will be pleased with you. And you can do all of that for the sake of influence. In fact, for a lot of you who've been in church for any number of years, either you've heard stories or you've been in churches where people will use, and even pastors will use the power of position and the power of religion to have authority and influence over other people. It's easy in the church to fall into religion being the reason that we have influence or importance, but that's not the reason we have influence or importance. The world tells us the same thing, that influence and importance are the most important thing. Now, the world says something different. The world around us in relativism says that influence and power are the best thing you can have, and you need to go for it with everything you have. Cheat, lie, steal, as long as you get ahead. Because truth doesn't really matter. It's all relative. In fact, they would say that even if you have weakness, don't show it. Only show your strength and your goodness. Right? That's why social media is one big lie. Because every once in a while, I'll be like, oh, I should post when I'm having a really bad day. My kids won't listen to me. I usually post pictures of my kids when they're happy and doing wonderful things. You think my children never disobeyed? That's the message of relativism. Post the good stuff. Only show the good stuff. If you have a bad side to you, do it when no one else is around. Because by posting and showing your goodness and your strength, you will have more influence. You will be better. You will feel better. And even if you don't have it, fake it till you make it. Fake it till you become it. That's the message of relativism. Even if you don't have it, just fake it. It's close enough. It's good enough. But the gospel says something totally different. The gospel says influence and power is Christ, who though he is on trial and is completely right, doesn't open his mouth to defend himself. Ultimate influence and power are God's, and they are seen most in the death of Jesus Christ, that he would influence and change the world through his own death and sacrifice. He did it once and for all. He isn't a weak high priest who has to do offerings every year. No position, no religion, no display of goodness and strength can match the lowly sacrifice of Jesus Christ, who dies a criminal's death on the cross for you and for me. The solution for our religion and the solution for the display of our goodness and influence is only to embrace our weakness and our failure. Because true power comes in weakness. That's the message of the gospel. Paul, in 2 Corinthians 12, he has this pain, this thing that is making him weak, and he asks God to take it away from him. God says no. And Paul, he doesn't curse God. He doesn't deny God because God isn't making things easier. He says that in his weakness, by the grace of God, God is strong. But we tell ourselves this lie in church, too. Prosperity gospel teaches it. You feel the temptation to teach it in church. That if you admit your weakness and failures, that if you admit that you're a sinner, that then you will be strong. That strength comes from within if we are honest and tell the truth. But that's not the truth. The truth is that we need to admit that we are weak and trust in the only one who is strong. True strength is not ours. It's all God's. So we this morning need to like Peter, realize that we are weak, that we are failures. Like Annas should realize that he is weak, that he is the unrighteous judge. And all of us need to look to the strength of the gospel. Because that's what Jesus is saying here. I don't have to show you anything special now. I've already said it. I don't need to do any miraculous sign. I've already done enough. I have one more thing to do. To die on the cross. To show that the truth strength is not overcoming Rome, it's overcoming sin. And so we must admit our weakness. And if you're here and you are not a follower of Christ, that does not mean that you just say, I am weak, so God make me strong. It means you say, I am a sinner, and I will follow Christ with everything I have. I will trust in him, I will look to him. And then you will be saved. It's not by works, it's not by a specific prayer. It's not by walking down an aisle. You can do those things on the way to trusting and repenting. All of that is just faith and repentance before Him. So if you are here and you are not a follower of Christ, let me encourage you to look to Him, to trust in Him, to trust in the testimony that He has already given, that He is the way, the truth, and the life, that He is the resurrection and the life, that He is the Son of God. Before Abraham was, I am. True bread, true light, the true high priest who stands before God for us. That even though we are weak, we have a strong high priest who has already made that sacrifice for us. Let's pray. Father, we come to you in our weakness. If we're honest, we know that we would we would be just like one of these disciples. Whether we would deny you outright or abandon you as a child, Lord, we are not strong, we are weak. But you are strong. In the face of injustice, you are strong. In the face of unrighteousness, you are strong. You are a strong high priest who pleads on our behalf, whose blood was poured out on our behalf. Let us look to you and trust in you. I pray all this in Jesus Christ. In His name, by the Spirit's power. Amen.